The book of Proverbs opens with a timeless invitation to seek wisdom above all else. In a world full of noise, distraction, and conflicting voices, Proverbs 1 reminds us that there is a voice worth hearing, the voice of wisdom. This voice does not whisper only to a chosen few. It cries aloud in the streets, calling all people to listen. Its goal is clear: to shape character, protect from destruction, and lead to life. From the start, Solomon teaches that wisdom is not optional. It is survival. The introduction of Proverbs 1 is not abstract philosophy. It is practical, urgent, and deeply personal. It speaks to the young and to the simple, offering guidance for life's crossroads. It warns of the traps of greed, the seduction of evil, and the destruction of folly. And above all, it establishes the foundation of true knowledge, the fear of the Lord. This chapter sets the stage for a journey, showing us that wisdom is not just information, it is transformation. As we step into the lessons of Proverbs 1, we are invited to see our lives differently. Every choice matters. Every voice we listen to shapes our destiny. And while the world offers countless invitations, only wisdom leads to safety and peace. This is the heartbeat of the chapter. Wisdom calls, but will we listen? Before we continue, if you like our videos and feel that they have blessed your life, like and comment, even if it's just an amen. This makes a huge difference in getting this content to more people and impacting lives. If you are not subscribed yet, take the opportunity to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share with your loved ones. This way, YouTube will get to know you better and suggest even more videos like this to help you on your faith journey. Help spread this message of faith and hope. Each like, comment, and share strengthens this work, which we do with great care to build up your life. Together, we can reach even more hearts. Continuing. Life is a vast field of choices, and every decision opens or closes doors along the way. Proverbs 1 begins by showing us that wisdom is like a map, guiding us through dangerous shortcuts and deceptive valleys. It's not only about accumulating knowledge, but about learning how to live with discernment. Solomon makes it clear from the start that wisdom must be pursued. It does not simply fall into our hands. This pursuit demands effort, discipline, and humility. Ignoring it is like walking through a dense forest without a compass. The pursuit of wisdom is not about ready-made answers. It is an ongoing process of learning to interpret life. Every experience, whether painful or victorious, contains a hidden lesson. But only those willing to listen can extract this treasure. Wisdom does not reveal itself to those who disregard it. It shows itself to those who pause, observe, and inquire. This teaches us that life is not random, but a training ground where God shapes us. Those who pursue wisdom learn how to find meaning even in their tears. Solomon presents wisdom as something accessible to all, but it requires a decision. It is not a secret reserved for the elite, but a treasure offered to anyone bold enough to seek it. The key that unlocks this treasure, however, is humility. Acknowledging that we don't know everything is the first step toward learning. Pride is the greatest enemy of wisdom, for it closes the ears to counsel. While the arrogant stumble over their own mistakes, the humble grow stronger with every lesson learned. It is striking that Solomon, the wisest man of Israel, reminds us that wisdom is not a destination but a journey. He doesn't speak of a final point, but of a path to walk daily. This teaches us that in this life, we never reach complete wisdom. There is always more to hear, more to learn, and more to apply. The truly wise are not those who think they know much, but those who understand they can always know more. This is the secret of constant growth and maturity. Pursuing wisdom is not only about reading, studying, or listening to advice, but about applying it. Knowledge without action is like a lamp without power. It cannot light anything. True wisdom shines when we put divine principles into practice in real situations. It shows itself in patience when offended, in justice when under pressure, and in integrity when tempted by greed. It is in the everyday moments, not just in theory, that wisdom proves its worth. Wisdom also has a deeply practical nature. It organizes our inner life and shapes our relationships. Without it, emotions dominate us, relationships collapse, and decisions lead us astray. But with wisdom, we learn to manage people, money, time, and even pain. It becomes the axis that balances every area of life. This is why the invitation of Proverbs 1 is not merely to admire poetic words, but to embrace a way of living that transforms us from the inside out. Ultimately, to pursue wisdom is to pursue God, for true wisdom comes from Him. Solomon shows us that instruction and prudence are not merely human constructs, but reflections of God's heart. This means that seeking wisdom without seeking God leaves us incomplete. Books, mentors, and courses may help, but they cannot replace the source. Transformation begins here, admitting that we cannot walk alone, but with wisdom from above, we can face any valley and rise with strength. Instruction is not just about transferring information, it's about shaping who we become. Proverbs 1 highlights that instruction brings justice, judgment, and equity into our daily lives. These are not abstract ideas, but guiding principles that mold character. A person who receives instruction learns not only what is right, but also how to act rightly. In other words, instruction is the framework that strengthens the heart and disciplines the mind. Without it, we remain impulsive, unsteady, and vulnerable to poor choices. Character is forged in the fire of correction. To receive instruction means to accept direction even when it is uncomfortable. Wisdom reminds us that resistance to discipline creates weakness, while acceptance of guidance produces strength. Like iron shaped under the blacksmith's hammer, our hearts are molded by lessons that sometimes sting but ultimately make us durable. Each correction, if embraced, becomes a safeguard against future failures. It is not punishment, it is preparation for greater responsibilities. Justice, judgment, and equity become the fruits of instruction. They are the marks of a life that is learning how to walk with integrity. A person trained in these values doesn't just avoid mistakes. They become a source of fairness and stability for others. Instruction equips us to lead with righteousness and treat people with dignity. In a world full of corruption, this kind of character stands out like a bright light in the middle of darkness. That light is what society desperately needs today. Instruction also protects us from deception. Without it, we are easily swayed by persuasive words, false promises, or the seductions of quick gain. Proverbs is clear. Wisdom trains us to discern truth from lies. Instruction sharpens our vision so we can see the hidden traps behind attractive offers. It gives us the ability to step back and measure the consequences before we act. Many fall into destruction not because they lacked opportunity, but because they rejected the discipline that would have warned them. Another truth about instruction is that it builds humility. To listen and obey requires us to set aside pride and acknowledge our need to grow. The arrogant despise instruction because they believe they already know enough. But humility opens doors to endless growth. The person who honors instruction doesn't stagnate, they flourish. And as they grow, their character becomes more solid, trustworthy, and unshakable. This is why God uses instruction to refine those He loves. Instruction is also generational. What we receive, we pass on. A child who honors the teaching of parents inherits a crown of grace. A community built on instruction transmits wisdom to the next generation, preventing them from repeating the same mistakes. In this way, instruction becomes a legacy that outlives us. Our willingness to learn today influences not only our life, but also the lives of those who come after us. Refusing instruction is not only self-destructive, it is irresponsible toward the future. Finally, instruction shapes us into vessels that God can trust. Without discipline and correction, we are unstable and unreliable. But through instruction, our character becomes aligned with God's purposes. We become people who not only know the right path, but walk it consistently. Instruction may feel heavy at times, but its reward is a life that reflects justice, judgment, and equity. And when these qualities flow through us, we no longer live just for ourselves. We become instruments of wisdom and transformation in the world. Proverbs 1 reminds us that even the simple can receive prudence when they listen. Simplicity in itself is not a curse, but a state of openness. The danger arises when simplicity turns into naivete that refuses to grow. Wisdom enters the life of the simple not to shame them, but to equip them. It transforms innocence into discernment, giving strength to those who once lacked direction. Simplicity guided by wisdom becomes a fertile ground for maturity. It is not about remaining ignorant, but about being humble enough to learn. The truth is that simplicity can be a starting point for greatness. Many people despise the simple, assuming they are destined for insignificance. Yet Proverbs teaches that God delights in taking the ordinary and clothing it with understanding. A heart that admits its lack is already ahead of the arrogant who pretend to know everything. Simplicity guided by wisdom becomes a strength because it allows one to remain teachable. It is not weakness. It is potential waiting to be shaped. The beauty of this lesson lies in accessibility. Wisdom does not belong only to scholars, leaders, or philosophers. It is available to all who listen. The simple man on the street, the young woman starting her journey, the child who is still learning, all can grow into discernment if they choose to hear. This inclusivity of wisdom reveals the heart of God. He does not limit understanding to the elite, but offers it freely to anyone willing to receive. Simplicity is no barrier to divine insight. However, simplicity without direction is dangerous. Those who remain passive and uninterested in wisdom will eventually be swept away by deception. A simple person without prudence is easily persuaded by smooth talk, manipulated by appearances, and trapped by false promises. That is why Proverbs insists that simplicity must be guided. To be simple and careless is to walk blindly into traps. But to be simple and attentive to wisdom is to build a life on solid foundations. Simplicity, when taught, grows into discernment. A once naive mind can become wise enough to resist temptation, make sound decisions, and guide others. The transformation happens not by chance, but by deliberate choice to hear and apply instruction. This shows us that no one is too small to be used by God. The simple person who allows wisdom to shape them may end up becoming a counselor, a leader, or a protector of many. Their journey proves the power of growth. This also speaks against the lie of comparison. Some think they cannot achieve wisdom because they lack the education, background, or resources of others. Yet Proverbs declares that wisdom is not bound by such limits. The starting point does not determine the finish line. Even the simple can be clothed with discernment, and even the inexperienced can grow into people of depth and stability. With God's wisdom, simplicity can turn into resilience, strength, and purpose. Ultimately, the value of simplicity guided by wisdom is transformation. God delights in lifting the humble and filling them with discernment. This is the power of Proverbs 1, to remind us that no one is disqualified from wisdom. The simple who choose to listen will no longer remain vulnerable, but will grow into men and women of understanding. They will not be mocked for their lack, but honored for their growth. And in the end, their story will testify that wisdom belongs to all who earnestly seek it. One of the most striking truths of Proverbs 1 is that the wise will hear and increase in learning. This shows us that wisdom is never static. It is dynamic, always expanding. No matter how much a person already knows, there is always more to understand. Growth, in the biblical sense, is not a destination, but a process. To stop learning is to stop living. The wise recognize that every season of life has fresh lessons to teach, and they remain open to them. Growth requires a posture of humility. Those who think they already know everything become stagnant, while those who acknowledge their limits keep advancing. Solomon emphasizes that even the wise need to listen and seek counsel. This dismantles the illusion that wisdom is about superiority. Instead, it is about being teachable. The truly mature do not boast about their knowledge. They remain students of life. The moment we stop listening, we begin to shrink instead of grow. Continuous growth also means adapting to new challenges. Life presents circumstances that our past experiences cannot fully explain. Each new trial demands new understanding, new strategies, and new courage. The wisdom that served us yesterday may not be enough for tomorrow's battle. That is why God calls us to keep listening, keep receiving instruction, and keep applying truth. Growth is the ability to face new realities with fresh discernment. It is about becoming deeper, not just older. This principle destroys the myth of arrival. Many imagine that maturity means reaching a point where no further change is needed. But Proverbs shows us that growth has no finish line in this life. There is always another layer of wisdom to uncover, another area of character to refine, another decision to make with greater clarity. Even Solomon, with all his wisdom, understood that learning never ends. A stagnant heart is the enemy of divine wisdom. The beauty of continuous growth is that it turns every experience into a classroom. Success teaches gratitude, failure teaches resilience, and trials teach dependence on God. Nothing is wasted for the one who keeps listening. Every season, no matter how dark, carries seeds of growth for those who seek wisdom. What others see as random events, the wise see as opportunities to expand their understanding. With this mindset, life becomes a journey of constant transformation. Growth also has a communal aspect. When the wise continue to grow, they not only benefit themselves, but also those around them. Their insight becomes counsel for others. Their lessons become protection for the inexperienced, and their maturity becomes an anchor in unstable times. The one who grows continuously becomes a source of stability and inspiration. This shows us that our pursuit of wisdom is never just for us, it is also for the generations that follow. Ultimately, continuous growth reflects the infinite nature of God. Since He is endless in knowledge, love, and power, our journey of learning Him and His ways will never be complete. Every step forward reveals that there is still more to discover. This truth frees us from arrogance and keeps us hungry for more of Him. Proverbs 1 teaches that the wise embrace growth as a lifestyle. They never stop listening, never stop learning, and never stop becoming more like the one who is wisdom itself. At the very heart of Proverbs 1 lies a foundational truth. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. This phrase is not about being terrified of God, but about living with a deep reverence for Him. To fear the Lord means to recognize His greatness, authority, and holiness, and to live in awe of who He is. Without this posture, all other forms of knowledge remain shallow. True wisdom begins when we position ourselves under God's rule, acknowledging that He is the source of truth. The fear of the Lord creates alignment. It reorders our priorities. shaping the way we see life, people, and decisions. Without reverence for God, knowledge can become prideful, selfish, or destructive. But when our knowledge is rooted in awe of Him, it transforms into discernment that builds instead of destroys. This principle reminds us that wisdom is not primarily intellectual. It is relational. It flows from walking humbly with God, honoring Him in all we do. Many pursue knowledge for personal gain, control, or recognition. But Proverbs 1 warns us that such knowledge is empty if it is detached from reverence for the Lord. The fear of the Lord purifies our motives, ensuring that our learning does not turn into arrogance. It humbles us, reminding us that no matter how much we know, God knows infinitely more. This humility protects us from the downfall that often comes with pride. It is the posture of the wise heart. To fear the Lord is also to trust His instructions, even when they challenge our desires. It is easy to obey when we agree, but true reverence is revealed when we submit even in disagreement. The fear of the Lord means believing that His way is better, even if it contradicts our logic. This surrender becomes the gateway to deeper wisdom. Those who reject His correction remain blind, while those who accept it grow into true understanding. The contrast in Proverbs 1 is clear. The wise fear the Lord, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. This reveals that foolishness is not merely ignorance, it is rebellion. It is the refusal to honor God as the ultimate source of truth. Such a person may have intelligence, but lacks true wisdom. Their path leads to emptiness because they build without foundation. By contrast, those who fear the Lord build on rock, and their lives withstand storms. The fear of the Lord also brings security. It teaches us that wisdom is not just about avoiding mistakes, but about walking in harmony with God's protection. Reverence opens the door for divine counsel, guidance, and provision. It reassures us that we are not navigating life alone, but under the care of the Creator. The fear of the Lord is not a weight, it is a covering. Those who embrace it live with clarity, direction, and confidence that God is with them. Ultimately, the fear of the Lord is the beginning, but it is also the sustaining force of knowledge. It is the entry point into wisdom, but also the anchor that keeps us from drifting. Every step we take in wisdom starts with reverence and continues in reverence. Proverbs 1 calls us back to this foundation. Without awe of God, all else collapses. But with it, life gains meaning, decisions gain clarity, and even suffering gains purpose. This is the wisdom that never fades. Proverbs 1 draws a sharp contrast between wisdom and folly. While the wise embrace instruction, the fool despises it. Foolishness is not simply a lack of knowledge, it is an active rejection of correction and truth. A fool refuses to listen, believing they already know enough, and this arrogance blinds them to danger. The tragedy of foolishness is that it builds confidence without foundation. It creates a sense of security that is nothing more than an illusion, and when storms come, destruction follows. The danger of foolishness is that it isolates a person from growth. When someone despises wisdom, they cut themselves off from the very source of transformation. Without correction, they repeat the same mistakes over and over, calling them new opportunities. Their lives become cycles of frustration, brokenness, and regret. Proverbs shows us that the fool doesn't simply stumble once. They keep stumbling because they refuse to change. This repetition is the hallmark of folly. Foolishness also distorts values. A fool treasures what is temporary and despises what is eternal. They chase after pleasure, wealth, or recognition, only to discover that none of these satisfy the soul. Worse, their pursuit often harms others along the way. Because they lack discernment, they justify dishonesty, indulge in selfishness, and ignore justice. In the end, they trade their integrity for shadows. The danger is not only personal downfall, but the destruction of those influenced by their path. Another danger of foolishness is vulnerability. Without wisdom, fools are easily manipulated, deceived, and entrapped. They lack the discernment to recognize hidden motives or false promises. Proverbs warns that such people fall prey to schemes that could have been avoided with prudence. The fool becomes their own worst enemy, walking blindly into traps while blaming circumstances or others. Their refusal to learn becomes the very snare that entangles them. Foolishness also provokes God's judgment. To despise wisdom is, in essence, to despise the voice of God. It is not a neutral stance. It is rebellion. Proverbs makes it clear that fools mock the very counsel that could save them. This mockery invites calamity, for God allows people to reap what they sow. The fool eats the fruit of their own choices, discovering too late that their contempt for instruction has consequences. What was ignored in peace becomes unbearable in crisis. Yet perhaps the greatest danger of foolishness is wasted potential. Every person is born with the capacity to learn, grow, and fulfill a divine purpose. But the fool squanders this gift, trading growth for pride and transformation for stubbornness. They remain trapped in mediocrity, not because they lacked opportunity, but because they rejected it. This truth is sobering. Foolishness does not only destroy, it also prevents what could have been. The loss is immeasurable. Ultimately, Proverbs 1 shows that foolishness is a choice. People are not condemned to remain fools. They choose to reject wisdom. This means there is always a way out, but it begins with humility. The wise fear the Lord and embrace instruction, but the fool resists both. The danger of foolishness is not only in its immediate consequences, but in the trajectory it creates. To remain a fool is to walk steadily toward ruin, but to turn toward wisdom is to step into life. Proverbs 1 highlights the importance of honoring the instruction of a father and the teaching of a mother. These words are not just cultural advice, but divine wisdom. Family is the first classroom where character is shaped and values are formed. The guidance of parents is compared to a crown of grace and a chain of honor. These symbols represent dignity, protection, and beauty. Listening to family instruction is not about limitation, but about inheritance, a heritage of wisdom passed down through generations. The value of family guidance is that it provides stability. Parents who walk in wisdom offer their children a framework that protects them from destructive choices. Their words become guardrails that keep them from falling off dangerous cliffs. When children embrace this guidance, they do not need to learn every lesson through pain. They can build upon the wisdom of those who came before. This is the blessing of generational instruction. It saves time, prevents regret, and multiplies strength. Ignoring family instruction, however, opens the door to unnecessary battles. Proverbs warns us that those who despise the wisdom of parents lose a shield of protection. They expose themselves to the traps of the world without the covering of counsel. Rebellion may feel like freedom in the moment, but it often leads to bondage later. God places parents as guides, not to restrict, but to equip. Their instruction, when embraced, becomes a lifelong anchor in a storm-filled world. The teaching of parents also reflects God's design for community. Family is the foundation of society, and when it is ignored, culture collapses. The wisdom of fathers and mothers carries principles of justice, discipline, and love. To abandon this foundation is to weaken society at its core. Conversely, when families pass down godly instruction, they build communities marked by strength, stability, and hope. What begins in the home ripples outward to shape nations. Family guidance also speaks to identity. Through their words, parents affirm values and remind their children of who they are. Instruction from home is more than advice. It is a declaration of belonging. Children who honor these teachings carry confidence because they know they are not walking alone. The diadem and necklace symbolize dignity. They remind us that wisdom from family is not a burden, but an adornment. It clothes us with honor in a world quick to strip it away. Even when families are imperfect, the principle remains. God often uses the voices of parents or mentors to shape us. Their words, when rooted in truth, echo divine wisdom. For those who did not receive such guidance, Proverbs invites them to become the beginning of a new legacy. To honor instruction is to start a chain of blessing for future generations. What may have been absent in the past can be restored in the future through obedience today. Ultimately, the value of family guidance is that it mirrors God's heart. Just as earthly parents guide their children, the Heavenly Father instructs His people. To embrace family instruction is to practice the humility and obedience required to follow God. It teaches us to listen, to honor, and to apply wisdom. Proverbs 1 declares that such instruction is not only protection, but adornment. It makes life not only safer, but richer, filled with dignity, grace, and divine favor. In Proverbs 1, Solomon gives a direct warning. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. This is not just parental advice, but divine strategy. Temptation often comes in the form of companionship, when voices around us invite us to compromise. Evil rarely appears openly destructive. It disguises itself as belonging, opportunity, or adventure. The call here is clear: resistance. Wisdom teaches us that not every invitation deserves a yes. Sometimes the most powerful word we can speak is no. The danger of evil is that it often begins with small compromises. Few start by planning destruction, but many are lured by the promise of acceptance, wealth, or excitement. The enemy's trap is subtle. He knows that people long for connection and recognition. Evil exploits this hunger, offering counterfeit community that leads to ruin. To resist evil means to discern the hidden cost behind attractive words. It is to look beyond the surface and recognize the path it creates. Evil also preys on impatience. The temptation to gain quickly what should be earned slowly is a hallmark of sin. Proverbs warns of sinners who promise treasures, easy gain, and shared success. But what they offer is not abundance, it is robbery. What appears to be unity is actually bondage. When we align with evil, we inherit its destruction. Wisdom calls us to resist shortcuts that compromise integrity, because anything gained dishonorably will ultimately be lost. Resisting evil requires conviction. It is not enough to know what is right. We must be anchored deeply enough to stand firm when pressure comes. Temptation is persuasive, and without inner resolve, we are easily swayed. This is why Proverbs urges us to guard our steps and avoid walking in the paths of the wicked. Conviction protects us from persuasion. It allows us to stand when the crowd bends. To resist evil is to choose the narrow road, even when the wide one looks easier. Another danger of evil is its communal nature. Sinners invite us into one purse, promising shared reward. But this shared destiny is actually shared destruction. Evil never travels alone. It always seeks recruits. That is why wisdom urges separation. When we resist, we not only protect ourselves, but also break the cycle of destruction. By refusing to join, we deny evil its power to multiply. Resistance is not selfish. It is preservation for ourselves and those who watch us. Evil also blinds people to its consequences. Proverbs describes sinners lying in wait for the innocent, not realizing they are ambushing their own souls. This is the paradox of sin. It promises life but delivers death. It promises gain but delivers loss. Those who participate in evil end up devouring themselves, Wisdom unmasks this deception, teaching us that to harm others is ultimately to harm ourselves. The one who digs a pit for another eventually falls into it. Ultimately, the call to resist evil is an invitation to freedom. Saying no to sin is not about missing out, but about being preserved for something greater. God calls us to rise above the enticements of the crowd and walk in paths of righteousness. This resistance is not weakness, it is strength. It requires courage to stand apart when others conform. Proverbs 1 reminds us that the wise choose integrity over acceptance, discipline over indulgence, and life over destruction. Proverbs 1 exposes the deceptive nature of greed. Those enticed by quick riches believe they are gaining, but in reality they are sowing destruction. Greed blinds people to the cost of their pursuit, making them willing to harm others for personal advantage. What looks like gain is actually loss, because dishonesty poisons the soul. Greed promises satisfaction, but never delivers. It only creates hunger for more. It is a fire that consumes without ever being quenched. The illusion of greed lies in its disguise as opportunity. It whispers, "This is your chance, don't miss it." But wisdom teaches us to ask, at what cost? Greed convinces us that possessions equal security, when in truth they enslave. The more we chase, the more restless we become. Proverbs reveals that those who build their lives on covetousness end up trapped in a cycle of dissatisfaction. Greed is not abundance, it is emptiness wearing a mask. Another danger of greed is that it corrupts community. The invitation to share. One purse may sound like unity, but it is unity in destruction. When people band together in selfish ambition, they form alliances built on lies. Such partnerships cannot last because they are rooted in exploitation. What begins as shared gain ends in shared ruin. Greed divides relationships, erodes trust, and destroys integrity. No treasure is worth the price of broken fellowship. Greed also blinds us to justice. Those consumed by covetousness disregard the innocent, seeing people as obstacles or tools. Proverbs describes the wicked lying in wait to ambush the blameless, all for the promise of gain, but in harming others, they set a snare for themselves. This is the self-destructive nature of greed. It leads people to destroy their own lives, while reaching for more. In trying to devour others, they end up consuming themselves. The tragedy of greed is that it feeds on insecurity. People believe that having more will protect them from fear or lack. But greed never produces peace. It multiplies anxiety. The more we cling to possessions, the more afraid we become of losing them. True security does not come from what we own, but from who holds us. Proverbs points us to the wisdom that contentment is richer than covetousness, and peace is more valuable than possessions. Greed also robs us of purpose. When the heart is fixated on gain, it cannot hear the higher calling of God. Lives become reduced to the pursuit of wealth, missing the eternal mission for which we were created. Instead of being stewards of blessing, the greedy become prisoners of desire. The illusion of greed is that it expands life, but in truth, it shrinks it, narrowing everything to possessions that cannot last. Ultimately, Proverbs 1 unmasks greed as a thief of the soul. It destroys integrity, relationships, peace, and purpose. The wise learn to resist its voice, knowing that true treasure lies in righteousness and contentment. Greed offers a bag of riches but delivers emptiness. Wisdom offers discipline and delivers abundance. To see through the illusion of greed is to protect one's soul and to embrace a life richer than money can buy. In Proverbs 1, wisdom is not hidden in secret chambers or reserved for the elite. Instead, she raises her voice in the streets, in the marketplaces, and at the city gates. This imagery reveals a vital truth. God makes wisdom accessible to all. It is not concealed, but proclaimed openly where everyone can hear. The call of wisdom echoes in the noise of daily life, reminding us that guidance is never far away. The real question is not whether wisdom speaks, but whether we are listening. The fact that wisdom calls publicly shows that God is just. No one can claim ignorance as an excuse for folly. The opportunity to learn is offered openly. Wisdom invites the simple to grow, the mocker to repent, and the fool to change course. Her words are not reserved for scholars, but for ordinary people navigating real struggles. By lifting her voice in public spaces, wisdom reminds us that divine guidance meets us where we are, in the midst of our routines and decisions. Wisdom's call also exposes human resistance. Though her voice is loud, many ignore it. People prefer the noise of distraction, the comfort of mockery, or the blindness of stubbornness. The tragedy is not that wisdom is silent, but that hearts are closed. Proverbs paints a sobering picture. Wisdom cries out, yet the crowd walks by as if nothing were said. This neglect is not due to lack of opportunity, but to hardened hearts. The public call of wisdom also highlights urgency. She does not whisper quietly in corners. She cries out because time is short. Decisions made today shape destinies tomorrow. Ignoring wisdom is not harmless. It has consequences. Just as a warning shout saves someone from an oncoming danger, wisdom's cry is meant to rescue. To treat her voice casually is to flirt with disaster. The urgency of her tone is an act of mercy, a plea for us to turn before it is too late. Another aspect of wisdom's call is inclusivity. She does not discriminate by status, education, or wealth. Whether rich or poor, old or young, educated or unlearned, all are invited to listen. This demolishes the idea that only certain people can access divine insight. Wisdom is not elitist. It is generous. Her words are available to anyone who will stop long enough to listen. This reveals God's heart. He longs for all to walk in. Truth, not just a chosen few. The setting of her call, the gates, the streets, the marketplaces, also carries meaning. These were the places of decision-making, business, and community life. Wisdom calls us in the very arenas where choices are made, urging us to apply God's truth where it matters most. Faith is not confined to temples or sacred spaces. It is lived out in daily decisions, relationships, and work. Wisdom speaks in the public square because she belongs in every part of life. Ultimately, the public call of wisdom leaves us with a choice. Her voice is clear, her invitation is open, and her words are full of life, but she will not force her way in. We must respond. Those who hear and obey will be transformed, but those who ignore will face regret. Proverbs 1 reminds us that wisdom is not distant. It is near, crying out for attention. The wise pause to listen, the fool rushes past. The difference between ruin and life often lies in whether we heed her call. Proverbs 1 paints a vivid picture of what happens when people reject wisdom. Though she cries aloud, many refuse to listen. They turn away from her counsel, preferring their own paths. This rejection is not passive, it is deliberate. To ignore wisdom is to choose foolishness. The danger is that those who continually close their ears to truth will one day face the consequences of their neglect. Rejection of wisdom is not neutral. It sets a person on a path toward destruction. Rejecting wisdom leads to missed opportunities. Every instruction we ignore is a chance lost to grow, avoid harm, or walk in greater blessing. Wisdom does not shout forever. She calls, but her voice can fade if continually disregarded. A hardened heart eventually loses sensitivity to correction. What once stung as conviction becomes easy to dismiss. This deadening of the conscience is one of the greatest dangers of rejection. It blinds us to truth until it is too late. Another danger is that rejection creates arrogance. When people refuse wisdom, they elevate their own understanding above God's. This pride deceives them into thinking they are in control. But Proverbs shows us that self-reliance without divine guidance is a trap. Human reasoning, no matter how clever, cannot foresee every outcome. Without wisdom, pride becomes the architect of downfall. Rejecting wisdom is not independence, it is self-destruction disguised as freedom. Rejection also exposes us to calamity. Proverbs 1 warns that those who laugh at wisdom will one day be laughed at by disaster. This is not cruelty, but consequence. When wisdom's warnings are ignored, reality itself becomes the teacher. The problem is that reality is a harsh instructor. Those who mock counsel eventually face the storm unprepared. Their downfall is not because wisdom failed them, but because they refused her voice when it was available. The pain of rejecting wisdom is compounded by regret. When calamity strikes, the rejected suddenly wish to listen, but often it is too late. Proverbs describes them calling out, seeking wisdom, but finding none. The tragedy is not that wisdom was unavailable, but that it was ignored. Opportunities squandered cannot always be regained. This regret becomes a heavy burden, teaching us that the best time to embrace wisdom is when she first calls, not after disaster arrives. Rejecting wisdom also has generational impact. Our refusal to listen does not only affect us, it influences those who look to us. For example, children, friends, and communities absorb the consequences of foolishness. To despise wisdom is to pass down cycles of brokenness. Conversely, to embrace wisdom is to break destructive patterns. The stakes are high, for every choice we make ripples outward. Rejecting wisdom is not only a personal mistake, but a legacy of loss. Ultimately, Proverbs 1 reveals that rejecting wisdom is rejecting God Himself, for true wisdom flows from Him. To despise instruction is to resist His loving guidance. The danger is not only temporary hardship, but eternal consequence. Yet even here there is hope. The moment we choose to listen, the path can change. The call of wisdom is still ringing today. The wise will humble themselves, listen, and live. The fool will reject and perish. The choice remains ours. Proverbs 1 warns us that ignoring wisdom is not without cost. Indifference may feel harmless in the moment, but over time it leads to destruction. When wisdom calls and people shrug their shoulders, they are making a choice. Even silence is a decision. Indifference to God's voice plants seeds of ruin that eventually bear fruit. The danger is subtle because it doesn't look like rebellion, but its consequences are just as severe. To ignore wisdom is to walk toward danger blindfolded. Indifference dulls the heart. At first, the call of wisdom may stir a sense of conviction, but when ignored repeatedly, it becomes easier to dismiss. What once sounded urgent begins to sound optional. The more we delay, the harder it becomes to respond. Proverbs shows that this hardness of heart is deadly because it leaves people unprepared when crisis arrives. Indifference doesn't protect us from pain. It simply ensures we are caught off guard by it. Another price of indifference is vulnerability. Those who fail to heed wisdom are like houses with unlocked doors, easy targets for disaster. They do not fall because wisdom was unavailable, but because they chose not to act. Many calamities in life could be avoided if people had responded earlier to warning signs. Indifference blinds us to these signals, convincing us that nothing will happen. But the storm still comes, and those who ignored wisdom face its full force. Indifference also robs us of growth. Every moment we ignore instruction is a missed opportunity to develop character, deepen understanding, and walk in strength. Instead of advancing, the indifferent remains stagnant, circling in cycles of mediocrity. This lack of progress is not always obvious at first, but over time it becomes evident. While others flourish by listening, the indifferent wither. Life does not wait for those who hesitate. It moves forward, leaving them behind. Worse still, indifference multiplies consequences. Proverbs warns that those who hate knowledge and refuse the fear of the Lord will eat the fruit of their own ways. What begins as passive neglect becomes active destruction. Indifference toward wisdom eventually hardens into rejection of God. This is why Proverbs treats it so seriously. It is not merely delay, but rebellion in disguise. The one who says later often ends up saying never. The tragedy of indifference is that it often awakens too late. When calamity strikes, the indifferent suddenly wish to listen, but by then the season of opportunity has passed. Proverbs describes them calling out but receiving no answer, seeking but not finding. This painful regret is the harvest of ignored instruction. The lesson is clear. Wisdom must be embraced in the moment it is offered, not postponed until disaster forces attention. Ultimately, the price of indifference is life wasted. God offers wisdom as a guide to protect, strengthen, and bless. But indifference throws it aside as unimportant. In doing so, people trade peace for anxiety, growth for stagnation, and life for ruin. Proverbs 1 urges us to awaken before it is too late. Wisdom is calling even now, and the choice is ours. To embrace her is to live, to ignore her is to perish. Indifference is not neutral, it is deadly. One of the most sobering truths in Proverbs 1 is that a time comes when God no longer answers the rebellious. Those who continually reject wisdom and despise instruction will eventually cry out, but their cries will meet silence. This silence is not because God is cruel, but because they hardened their hearts until it was too late. The danger is real. Ignoring God's call today can lead to a day when His answer will not come. This is the justice of wisdom ignored. The silence of God is terrifying because it exposes the emptiness of rebellion. People who once mocked wisdom find themselves desperate for it, but the opportunity has passed. They wanted freedom without restraint, but in the end, they discover bondage without rescue. This reversal is the ultimate consequence of rebellion. What was once easily available is now withheld. God's silence becomes the echo of choices made in defiance. This principle reminds us that time is a gift, not a guarantee. Every call of wisdom is an act of mercy, inviting us to turn before calamity strikes. But mercy rejected repeatedly becomes judgment. When people demand their own way long enough, God allows them to have it, even if it leads to ruin. His silence is the confirmation that they chose to live without Him. And without Him, there is no wisdom, no protection, and no peace. The silence of God also strips away excuses. No one can say they were never warned, for wisdom cried in the streets and raised her voice in the gates. The rebellious ignored her, mocked her, or delayed responding. When destruction comes, they cannot blame God for being absent. His silence is not neglect, it is justice. It shows that every opportunity was given, every warning sounded, but the rebellious refused to listen. This silence is also a mirror of the heart. God's refusal to answer reflects the fact that the rebellious never truly sought Him. They wanted deliverance from consequences, but not transformation of character. Their cries in calamity are not repentance, but desperation. Wisdom distinguishes the difference. God does not reward false cries. He responds to genuine surrender. The silence reveals what was always true. They never wanted Him, only His benefits. Yet even in this severe warning, there is mercy for those who still hear today. The silence described in Proverbs is not meant to drive us to despair, but to urgency. It tells us, do not wait. If you hear wisdom's voice now, respond before the opportunity closes. The silence of God toward the rebellious is avoidable if we humble ourselves today. The window of grace is open, but it will not remain open forever. Ultimately, Proverbs 1 reminds us that rebellion ends in isolation from God. His silence is the ultimate consequence of a life lived apart from Him. The wise take this warning seriously and turn while they still can. The rebellious scoff until the silence comes, and then it is too late. Wisdom pleads with us. Listen now, respond now, and embrace the fear of the Lord. For in Him alone is life, but apart from Him there is only silence. Proverbs 1 shows us that fools do not need enemies to destroy them. They destroy themselves. By rejecting wisdom and despising correction, they set traps that ensnare their own lives. The text describes sinners plotting against the innocent, but ending up ambushing their own souls. This is the paradox of folly. The harm intended for others returns upon the fool. Sin is always self-destructive. What looks like gain in the moment leads to loss in the end. The self-destruction of fools begins with arrogance. They believe they know better than wisdom, so they ignore instruction. But this confidence is false. Every decision made apart from discernment plants seeds of ruin. A fool may laugh at warnings, but eventually reality proves them wrong. The harvest of rebellion is not delayed forever. It comes in its season. What was sown in pride is reaped in sorrow. This is the law of cause and effect written into the fabric of life. Another mark of self-destruction is blindness. Fools cannot see that their actions are leading them toward death. They justify choices that are harmful, convinced that nothing bad will happen. They think themselves invincible, yet they walk into traps that were obvious to the wise. This blindness is not due to lack of light, but to refusal of it. They close their eyes to truth, and in doing so, stumble over their own ignorance. The irony is that fools often believe they are outsmarting others. They scheme, deceive, or manipulate, thinking they are clever. But in the end, they are the ones deceived. Proverbs reminds us that those who chase unjust gain end up losing their own souls. Their cleverness backfires, and their own greed consumes them. What they thought was strategy turns into a snare. The fool's ambition becomes the weapon of their downfall. Self-destruction also comes from misplaced desires. Fools are driven by lust, greed, and selfishness, which pull them into decisions that corrode their integrity. Instead of mastering their desires, they are mastered by them. Their lack of self-control becomes the leash that drags them into ruin. While the wise harness desire with discipline, the fool indulges until it destroys them. In this way, folly is not only about ignorance, but also about unrestrained appetite. The tragedy of self-destruction is that it is preventable. No one is forced to be a fool. Wisdom cries out for all to hear. Yet those who despise instruction choose this path willingly. This makes their ruin even more devastating. It could have been avoided. Every warning rejected is another step closer to collapse. The fool dies not because wisdom was absent, but because they refused her hand. Their destruction is the fruit of their own rebellion. Ultimately, Proverbs 1 teaches that fools are their own worst enemies. They arm themselves with pride, blind themselves with arrogance, and ensnare themselves with greed. Their downfall is not imposed from the outside, but birthed from within. This truth is both sobering and hopeful. Sobering because it reveals the cost of folly. Hopeful because it means the cycle can be broken. Anyone who turns to wisdom can escape self-destruction and step into life. Proverbs 1 closes with a promise of security for those who choose wisdom. Whoever listens to me will dwell safely and will be secure without fear of evil. This is a profound assurance. While the fool reaps destruction, the wise inherit peace. Safety here is not merely physical protection, but a state of inner rest. Wisdom does not eliminate trials, but it gives the strength and stability to endure them. Those who heed her voice live anchored, not shaken by every storm. The promise of safety begins with obedience. Wisdom is not passive. It requires listening and applying truth. When a person aligns their life with God's counsel, they build a fortress that cannot easily be shaken. Their choices carry stability, their relationships grow in trust, and their soul rests in peace. This security is not the absence of challenges, but the presence of discernment that guides them through. Listening creates protection, while ignoring creates exposure. This safety also addresses fear. Those who walk in wisdom are not tormented by constant anxiety because they know they are walking in God's ways. Fear of evil is replaced with confidence in His covering. This does not mean trouble will never come, but it means fear will not dominate. Wisdom equips us to face danger with courage and uncertainty with faith. The wise are not naive about life's risks, but they are unshaken because their trust is in God. The security of wisdom also flows into relationships. A wise person avoids destructive alliances, refuses dishonest gain, and treats others with justice. These choices build peace instead of conflict. While the fool stirs chaos, the wise cultivate harmony. This relational safety is part of God's design. When wisdom governs our interactions, it shields us from many unnecessary wounds. It does not guarantee a life free of opposition, but it protects us from self-inflicted pain. Another aspect of this promise is long-term stability. The fool may prosper temporarily, but their end is ruin. The wise may face challenges, but their path leads to life. The safety of wisdom is not measured in fleeting success, but in enduring legacy. Those who fear the Lord and embrace instruction leave behind strength, integrity, and blessing for generations. Their safety extends beyond themselves. It becomes a covering for their households and communities. The absence of fear described in Proverbs 1 is deeply spiritual. It is not rooted in human control, but in divine confidence. The wise can sleep in peace because they know their lives are aligned with God's order. While the world trembles at uncertainty, they rest in assurance. Wisdom becomes a shield for the mind, calming thoughts that would otherwise spiral into panic. This peace is one of the greatest rewards of choosing wisdom. It guards both the heart and the spirit. Ultimately, the promise of safety for the wise points us back to God, the source of wisdom. It is His presence that secures, His counsel that guides, and His promises that sustain. Proverbs 1 begins with the call to seek wisdom and ends with the reward of peace for those who respond. The path of the fool ends in destruction, but the path of the wise ends in life, security, and freedom from fear. The invitation is clear. Listen, and you will dwell safely. Proverbs 1 ends where every life eventually arrives, at the crossroads of wisdom and folly. Those who reject wisdom eat the fruit of their rebellion, trapped by their own choices. They discover too late that indifference is deadly and that rebellion leads to silence from God. The fool is not destroyed by chance, but by their own refusal to listen. Folly is self-inflicted ruin, but for those who embrace wisdom, the story is different. Their lives are marked by growth, peace, and security. They are not free from storms, but they are unshaken within them. They live with confidence, anchored in the fear of the Lord. Their steps are steady, their hearts are calm, and their legacy is lasting. While the fool perishes, the wise endure. The conclusion of Proverbs 1 is both warning and promise. It warns that wisdom rejected becomes judgment, but it promises that wisdom embraced becomes life. The choice belongs to each of us. Today, wisdom still calls. Her voice is clear and her invitation is open. Those who listen will dwell safely, free from fear. Those who ignore will face regret. The message is simple yet profound. Choose wisdom and choose life.